The arrival of the murderer. The orbital academy hung like a jewel in the void, a city of steel and glass tethered to nothing but spinning gravity plates. Through its corridors, students from 100 alien worlds moved with grace and precision, their movements honed over decades of training. Multi-limbed beings adjusted their energy armor, scaled creatures slithered past polished panels, and beings with bioluminescent veins exuded a soft glow that illuminated the hallways. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a human walked. Kade's boots clicked against the metal floor, echoing slightly in the cavernous hall. He wasn't tall, not by alien standards, and his frame looked ordinary, almost fragile. To anyone watching, he might have seemed out of place, a fragile, rare human among towering, predatory species. But Kade carried himself differently. Calm, observant, smirking. The kind of smirk that came from surviving worlds that made even the deadliest predators look like toddlers. Whispers followed him wherever he went. A human. What is he doing here? They said humans can't survive 5 minutes in basic combat exercises. Kade ignored them. He didn't need to prove anything, yet. The academy was a stage, and the real show was about to begin. The doors at the far end of the hall hissed open, and the instructors entered, a procession of alien authority figures whose presence alone demanded attention. They walked to the front of the amphitheater-like classroom, where dozens of alien students had already gathered, buzzing with anticipation. The head instructor, a towering reptilian being with armor plated like obsidian scales, silenced the room with a sharp hiss. Today, the instructor began, we introduce a new student. One who has distinguished himself in ways most of you cannot imagine. A hush fell over the room. Kade tilted his head, interested but not fazed. The instructor continued, stepping aside to reveal the newcomer, Xerath. The room collectively drew a breath. Xerath's presence was almost palpable, a coiled aura of lethal intent. Every inch of him radiated danger, from the sharp angles of his armored limbs to the predatory gleam in his eyes. He was a murderer, convicted in one of the galaxy's deadliest prisons, yet somehow transferred here to learn, or perhaps teach, the art of combat. The alien students shuffled nervously. Some inched backward, some clenched fists that looked far deadlier than human hands. They were anticipating blood, spectacle, fear. Perhaps they expected Kade, the human, to tremble. Kade didn't. He tilted his head, a smirk curling his lips. I see, he said softly, almost to himself. They finally brought out the big one. Xerath's eyes found Kade's across the room. For a moment, the chatter of the classroom disappeared. Here was a creature, small by comparison, yet unervingly calm. Xerath had killed for sport and survival. He'd thrived in environments that crushed others under their own fear. Yet this human, this fragile human, smiled at him. Smiled. The instructor's voice broke the tension. This is your chance to learn from one another, or perhaps to survive one another. Treat him as a student, but know his reputation precedes him. Xerath, the galaxy has whispered your name even here. Xerath inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the statement without pride, but with the quiet menace of a predator sizing up a prey. He then stepped into the center of the room, his armored frame moving with unnerving precision. The students instinctively gave him space. All except Kade. Kade continued to observe, taking in every detail. The weight distribution of Xerath's armor, the micro-adjustments in stance, the slight twitch of his jaw, tiny signs of impatience or eagerness. He didn't flinch. He didn't cower. He smirked because he understood something none of the aliens did. The world shapes humans differently. Deathworlders like him were forged in environments where every step could mean survival or death. Predators, toxic storms, collapsing cliffs. His childhood playground had been a constant test. He wasn't fragile. He was trained. He was ready. A voice broke Kade's thoughts. One of the taller alien students whispered, he'll be gone by the week's end. No human lasts here more than a few cycles. Kade's smirk widened, more confident now. They don't know, he muttered, almost amused, how wrong they are. The day progressed with introductions, course outlines, and basic assessments, but the tension never lifted. Zirith observed Kade as much as Kade observed him, both measuring, calculating, sizing up the other. There was a silent agreement in that gaze. Survival wasn't given, it was taken. And Kade, a human who had already survived worlds designed to kill him, would not give it lightly. By the end of the day, whispers about the human had changed tone. No longer purely derisive or dismissive, they carried a hint of caution. Something about Kade unsettled the Academy students. It wasn't strength alone. It was resilience, unpredictability, the kind of instinct honed only through living where everything is trying to kill you. As Kade left the classroom that evening, he glanced back at Zirith. The murderer's eyes followed him, calculating, curious, and, just maybe, a little wary. Kade smirked once more, the gesture both a greeting and a warning. They brought a murderer into class. They forgot to check who was already there. The first test. The Academy's central training arena was a labyrinth of steel corridors, glass-paneled towers, and floating platforms that hovered over a chasm of artificial fire. Drones hovered silently above, scanning, recording, and ready to neutralize any student who broke the strict rules of engagement. This was no ordinary combat drill. It was the first survival test of the semester. And for Kade, it was just another playground. The instructor's voice echoed over the intercom. You will be divided into pairs. Your objective: reach the extraction point at the far end of the arena. Traps, hazards, and opposing students are part of the challenge. Survival is your measure. Begin. A holographic panel blinked with names and pairings. Kade's eyes flicked across it. Fate, or perhaps the instructors, had paired him with Zirith. A predator against a predator. Alien students exchanged uneasy glances. Most had expected the human to be paired with someone weaker, a chance for him to learn or die quickly. Instead, he was paired with the galaxy's most notorious murderer. Ziritha's gaze met Kade's, and in that instant, everything else faded. The alien lunged first. Faster than most could track, blades extended from his forearms, gleaming under the arena's artificial lights. Most humans would have frozen. Kade smirked. He didn't dodge in the obvious direction. Instead, he pivoted sharply, letting the momentum of the attack carry him past Ziritha's strike, using the alien's own speed against him. Sparks flew as metal grazed metal. Kade's reflexes weren't just fast. They were honed by a lifetime of survival where hesitation was death. Around them, the other students reacted with shock. Kade moved like water through the battlefield, improvising with the environment. A broken railing became a lever. A stray drone's discarded battery became a makeshift smoke grenade. Every step he took was calculated, adaptive, and unpredictable. Zirith growled, adjusting his stance, and launched another attack. This time, Kade used a collapsing platform to redirect the force, sending Zirith tumbling into a low-energy barrier that buzzed against his armor. The alien slammed into it hard, yet immediately regained his footing, surprised, but far from defeated. You survived worse, I take it, Zirith hissed, circling. Kade smirked again, a flash of teeth beneath the helmet's visor. Worse? Try surviving 3 cycles on a world where everything wants to eat you before you reach 5 standard years. Zirith froze for a split second. Alien predators might kill, but they never endured Deathworlds. That pause was all Kade needed. The human began to turn the arena itself against his opponent. He kicked loose floor panels, sending sparks and debris flying. Energy conduits sparked, creating zones that were too dangerous for Zirith to enter without risk. Every object, every hazard, became a weapon in Kade's hands. Improvisation was instinct. Zirith attacked again, faster this time, blades aiming for vital points. Kade grabbed a jagged shard of metal from the ground, using it to parry and deflect, redirecting the alien's own energy against him. Sparks erupted in a dazzling display, drawing gasps from onlooking students. The human was not only surviving, he was dictating the pace, shaping the battlefield to his advantage. For the first time, Alien students whispered, not mockery but fear and awe. The human, he's controlling the fight? One said, voice trembling. Another nodded. They call him fragile. Look at him now. Minutes passed like seconds. Kade's breathing remained calm, steady. Xerath's, however, was sharp, measured, but increasingly tense. Each move the human made was unpredictable, exploiting instincts that no alien could fully anticipate. Kade wasn't just surviving. He was teaching the murderer a lesson in adaptability. Finally, the duel reached a narrow corridor, one too tight for Xerath to swing his blades effectively. Kade pressed his advantage, using the walls, debris, and a sudden burst of energy from a broken conduit. He forced Xerath to his knees. The alien's armor was scorched, sparks dancing across its surface. Xerath glared at him, and Kade's smirk widened beneath his helmet. Not bad, the human said, voice calm, almost teasing. For someone who calls themselves a murderer, you're sloppy. Xerath hesitated. Alien pride and the thrill of the kill battled against the respect forming in his mind. He realized, painfully, that brute strength alone could not overcome this human. This was a predator shaped not by violence, but by survival. The arena's timer beeped. Drill over. Students who survived emerged from the corridors, exhausted but alive. Kade stood in the center, hands slightly raised, not in victory, but in readiness. Xerath, still on one knee, finally looked up, something unspoken passing between them. Recognition. Kade's gaze swept across the arena. Alien students now looked at him differently, not with scorn, but caution. The human had survived what most would consider a death sentence. He had not only endured Xerath's attacks, but had dominated tactically, outsmarting a killer at every turn. As he exited the arena, Kade allowed himself a small grin. Another test completed, another lesson delivered without a word of bragging. Survival, cunning, adaptability. These were human traits honed on Deathworlds. Traits no alien predator could fully comprehend until it was too late. And somewhere behind him, Xerath rose to his feet, dusting himself off, eyes narrowing. Not with hatred, but with reluctant respect. They brought a murderer into the arena. They didn't realize the human was the real danger. The murderer's challenge. By the following cycle, the academy had fallen into an uneasy rhythm. Alien students whispered in corners, glancing at Kade with a mixture of awe, fear, and incredulity. Xerath, the so-called murderer, was no exception. He had expected to dominate the human easily, yet the arena had proven otherwise. And while his pride bristled, curiosity gnawed at him. It was mid-cycle when Xerath approached Kade in the dim corridors near the dormitory wings. His armored footsteps echoed softly, deliberate and controlled. No one else was around. You, Xerath hissed, his voice low and sharp. You survive by luck and tricks. I want to see what happens when it's just skill. Kade didn't flinch. He leaned against a wall, arms crossed, smirk playing on his lips. Skill, huh, he said. You really don't understand humans, do you? Xerath's gaze narrowed. I understand predators. You're fast, clever, but corner me and you'll fall. Kade's smirk widened. Corner you? You might be the murderer. But I've danced with predators that make you look like a kitten. Let's see who learns fastest. With that, they moved to a private duel chamber, a neutral environment designed to test combat skills without endangering others. The room was wide, circular, and filled with obstacles. Metal crates, uneven platforms, hanging cables. The lighting was harsh, creating shadows that stretched unnaturally across the walls. Xerath attacked immediately, blades flashing in a deadly arc. Most students would have panicked, but Kade moved like water, fluid and precise. He sidestepped, ducked, and redirected strikes with his forearm guards, barely leaving a mark on his armor. You're fast, Xerath growled, but speed alone won't save you. Kade laughed softly, the sound unnerving in the still room. I don't rely on speed alone. I survive because I adapt, and I've adapted my whole life. Xerath lunged again, changing tactics. This time, he feinted left and struck right, testing Kade's reflexes. Kade anticipated the move, using the alien's momentum to pivot, sending Xerath stumbling into a low-hanging cable. Sparks erupted where his armor scraped against exposed conduits. Xerath snarled, frustration sharpening his movements. "You fight differently," he muttered, circling. Kade's eyes scanned the chamber. Every platform, crate, and cable became part of his strategy. He grabbed a hanging metal chain and swung it, forcing Xerath to leap back. He kicked loose a crate, creating a temporary barrier. The chamber wasn't just a room. It was a weapon, a tool, a trap. "You improvise," Xerath admitted grudgingly. "You think like a predator that survived impossible odds." Kade's smirk didn't falter. "Exactly. You brought me here to see if you could break me. But the question is, can you keep up?" Xerath's attacks grew more precise, faster, more unpredictable. But Kade had learned to read patterns, to exploit small mistakes. When Xerath overextended his left arm, Kade ducked, grabbed a sharp fragment from the floor, and struck a weak point in the alien's armor. Not to kill, but to incapacitate. Sparks flew. Xerath stumbled, caught off balance. "Not bad," Kade said, breathing steady, almost relaxed. "But you're predictable when frustrated." Xerath froze, blinking at the human. His calculated attacks had been countered, his aggression manipulated, his own strength turned against him. And yet he was still standing. Alien pride demanded he continue, but curiosity whispered, perhaps humans were not what they seemed. For the next several cycles of the duel, Kade kept the upper hand without landing a killing blow. He maneuvered Xerath into traps, used the environment to his advantage, and forced the alien to adapt constantly. Xerath's initial confidence began to crack. Exhaustion showed in the subtle tremors of his armored limbs. Finally, Kade pressed his advantage. Using a combination of agility, instinct, and tactical foresight, he forced Xerath onto a narrow platform suspended over a small pit. One misstep, one wrong move, and the alien could have fallen, or worse. Kade stopped, stepping back, hands raised, as the arena's alarms signaled the duel's end. Xerath's breathing was heavy, his armor scorched and battered. Yet he looked at Kade with something unspoken, respect. "You are more than I expected," he admitted, voice grudging. "You are not merely fast or strong. You are dangerous in ways I didn't anticipate." Kade's smirk widened, the expression almost casual. "Dangerous? Maybe. But just surviving, that's what I do. And you just learned why humans from Deathworlds aren't easy to kill." A silence followed, broken only by the hum of the chamber's life support systems. Kade's eyes scanned Xerath once more. "Remember this, murderer. You can kill, maim, survive, but humans? We endure, we improvise, and we always find a way." Xerath straightened, acknowledging the lesson without words. Alien students who had observed the duel from control room would later call it legendary. Not for brutality, but for ingenuity and adaptability. The human had survived, dominated, and left a mark on the galaxy's most notorious killer. As Kade exited the duel chamber, his smirk never faded. The whispers would spread, the rumors would grow, and every alien who underestimated him would soon learn a dangerous truth. Humans were not fragile. They were unpredictable, adaptive, and impossible to contain. The Academy had introduced a murderer, but the human Deathworlder had just rewritten the rules of survival. The human Deathworlder smirks last. The Academy was quiet the morning after the duel, but the silence was heavy with anticipation. Alien students moved through the halls with careful eyes, glancing at Kade as he walked past. Even those who had once laughed at the human now avoided his gaze or studied him in wary respect. Rumors had spread overnight. The human had survived Xerath, outsmarted a murderer, and dominated the arena without breaking a sweat. Kade didn't care about whispers. He walked with the same calm confidence he always carried, boots clicking softly against the polished floors. He had never needed approval, only survival. But the reactions were amusing. Alien students still underestimated humans. They still assumed we were fragile. Yet, day by day, Kade was proving otherwise. The head instructor, scaled and imposing, called Kade to the command hall. The room's walls glowed with data streams and training metrics. Alien instructors observed from elevated platforms, their expressions unreadable, but Kade didn't flinch. He understood authority through instinct, calm, decisive, aware. "You have surpassed expectations," the head instructor said, voice resonating through the hall. "Not through strength alone, but through tactics, adaptability, and psychological acuity. You have unsettled the students." Kade tilted his head, smirk curling. "Good," he said simply. "They'll need that unease." The instructor's eyes flicked to a monitor showing Xerath in recovery. The murderer had healed physically, but Kade's actions had left a mark on the alien psyche. "Even Xerath," the instructor said, "acknowledges your capability. He is a formidable opponent, yet you controlled the environment, anticipated his attacks, survived, and outmaneuvered him at every turn." Kade nodded. "Deathworlders survive by anticipating the unpredictable," he replied. "That's not talent, it's habit." After the briefing, Kade left the hall, his path crossing the corridors crowded with alien students. Conversations hushed as he passed. Some whispered in awe. Others tried to rationalize the human's performance with excuses: luck, cheating, or unforeseen advantage. Kade knew better. Human advantage wasn't in brute force or sheer numbers. It was instinct, adaptability, and survival honed in the harshest environments in the galaxy. Xerath appeared as Kade reached the training courtyard, standing tall but unthreatened. "You did well," Xerath admitted, armor scratched and scorched, but his posture proud. "Perhaps I underestimated humans." Kade's smirk widened. "Perhaps you did. But it's not about underestimating humans. It's about understanding them. And that's a lesson most species never learn until it's too late." Xerath regarded him silently. The duel had not been decisive in the traditional sense. Neither had killed the other, yet one had clearly dominated. Kade's calm confidence, his ability to improvise, and his complete mastery of instinct had forced respect where fear had once resided. "Don't forget this feeling," Kade said, voice soft but commanding. "It's what happens when you bring a predator into a world that's already full of predators, and the human in the room is older than most of the threats you've faced." Xerath inclined his head, understanding. He would remember it, and so would the other students. Alien students who had mocked humans now avoided making the same mistake. The idea of fragility was fading, replaced with caution, respect, and a hint of fear. Later, Kade wandered the academy gardens, observing alien flora engineered for education and relaxation. The sky beyond the dome glowed faintly with distant stars. He reflected on what he had accomplished, not just surviving but shaping perception. The galaxy underestimated humans because they saw only weakness, never the resilience born of Deathworlds. Every scar, every survival instinct, every improvisation in the arena was a message. Humans endure. A group of younger alien students approached cautiously. "Human, how did you—" one began, voice hesitant. Kade merely smirked, the expression calm, almost casual. He didn't explain. Survival wasn't something you could teach in words. It was lived. They would learn in time, the hard way. By evening, the academy's corridors were filled with tales of the duel, recounted with awe and disbelief. "The human survived the murderer," whispered one. "He turned the arena into his weapon," said another. Even Xerath's grudging respect spread through the student body. Humans were no longer merely rare. They were dangerous, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. Kade returned to his quarters, the smirk still in place. He wasn't arrogant. He was aware. Awareness was survival. He knew that the academy was only the beginning, that challenges far greater than Xerath waited in the galaxy. But for now, the lesson had been delivered. Humans were a species to be respected, feared even for our adaptability, resilience, and instinct to survive against impossible odds. He looked out at the stars beyond the dome, thoughts calm and deliberate. The galaxy had underestimated him. They had underestimated humans. And that, Kade knew, would be a mistake they would never repeat. They brought a murderer into class. They forgot to check who was already in it. And the human Deathworlder? He always smirks last.